I read an interesting article the other day about information fatigue and a growing number of us suffering from mental bandwidth depletion. There's just too much information out there. You read one blog, then another one, and pretty soon you're confused as to what you should or shouldn't be doing. It's tough out there. That's why myself and the Practice of the Practice team have created a free 28-step private practice checklist for people who want to start their own practice, whether it's a side gig or a full-time job. This free checklist will help you go from 0 to 40K quickly with video walkthroughs and paced out emails. Also, useful steps for retaining clients and finding new ones. The best thing is it's no nonsense. It's no frills. It's just everything you need to start seeing clients. Download it for free today by going to practiceofthepractice.com/new. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/new. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 936. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. This is the 8th episode in this series, all about seven-figure private practices. We've been interviewing people that are at seven figures or above that have done some amazing things. Right at the beginning, we talked about what to do now before you're a seven-figure practice to position yourself. We covered how to grow without specializing. We talked about your leadership team. We talked about building a wellness space on 40 acres of land, when to know how to expand. We talked about early decisions that made a huge impact. And the last episode was all about hiring 10 people in 1 month. So if you missed any of those, make sure you go back and check those out. Some amazing seven-figure practice owners. And today is going to be in that same line of really deep discussions. And if you don't know, if you are a seven-figure practice owner, the Seven-Figure Practice Club has just opened up for applications. We're taking 12 people into that. This is our newest program. We heard from a lot of our group practice bosses and people that were in the Practice of the Practice world saying, there's just so many consultants out there. We just, are coming back to Practice of the Practice, or we were here for the whole time, and we just want to be around other people that are at seven figures. Do you have anything? And as we've surveyed seven-figure practice owners and talked to them, really having that community of other peers that can give them advice that are at their level. It's great if, there's people at six figures and there's people that are starting their group practice, but really seven-figure practice owners have said to us, we want something all our own. And so we have opened up the Seven-Figure Practice Club. We're going to be meeting twice a month. The first time is 90 minutes. And so we will have 3 25-minute hot seats where we are giving each other advice and tips and thoughts. And the second time is going to be one of our seven-figure practice owners doing a presentation on something they have just knocked out of the park. And so it's going to be a great chance for them to practice their consulting skills, articulating what they've done and their process and sharing that with the group, while also getting some really killer feedback from other seven-figure practice owners that are going to go give you rave reviews and promote you. And so it's going to be this cohort of people that have really nailed it, that want to support even more getting to that next level. We all plateau at times, and sometimes we need that kick to join a community, and that's what the Seven-Figure Practice Club's all about. We're also meeting up twice in person, one time here in Traverse City, Michigan, in northern Michigan. We're right here on the water in northern Michigan. And then another time yet to be determined later in the year. So if you want to apply for that, that's over at practiceofthepractice.com/club, where you can apply in December or January. I got to tell you, when I was going through my internship, I remember one of my last days, the therapist that was overseeing me, I was working at Catholic Family Services at the time, and he was a priest. He was also a school psychologist, and he was just like worked all the time. He did this private practice stuff and was my supervisor. And he took me out for coffee after we were wrapping up my hours, and he had printed out all of the paperwork for the state of Michigan for me to apply for the 2 licenses that I was eligible for. I was eligible for the psychology license and also the counseling license. I had no idea that you had to fill out paperwork and apply for a license. I mean, I was 25. I just thought you graduate and then all of a sudden you just get to go practice. I didn't know I needed a supervisor. I didn't know that I needed extra hours. I knew none of that. And had this guy, not out of the goodness of his heart, just said, here's the state paperwork. let me just show you what you need to have filled out. And it was so confusing. He took a highlighter. He said, you do these parts and you don't worry about these parts. He put a big X through. I'm like, wait, you can't put an X through state paperwork. He's like, that doesn't apply to you. That's for fully licensed people. And so often that's how the experience is for new graduates, people just entering the field, when you're in your practicum, when you're in your internship. And, for years, what I ended up doing was I hosted this thing in Traverse City called the Path to LPC. So licensed professional counselor here in Michigan. And it was just for students that were starting to graduate. They had to be within a year of graduation. I bought a whole bunch of just wine and fancy food, and these grad students came out, and we had people that were in their first couple of years after grad school, and we would just do a Q&A around what it's like, to leave grad school, enter the field. And we would get 30 or 40 people that came to that, and anybody that was eligible for supervision ended up signing up to do supervision with me. That's where I wish I had someone like Sherry. Today, we're going to be talking with Sherry about having a teaching practice. And I just think I missed quite an opportunity to have 20 people a year that I could have brought into my practice potentially. Sherry Linger is an LMHC in Florida with 25 years of experience in the field. She's a group practice owner, qualified supervisor, and certified parent coordinator. Her background is also in teaching middle school for 16 years and also an adjunct professor. Sherry, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you here and to talk about a teaching practice, talk about your mega group practice. I want to just go back to why in the beginning, when you had a solo practice, did you start a solo practice?
Why did I start a solo
Yeah.
practice?
Why'd you start? Why'd you get started in this field?
Yeah, so I'm one of those oddballs who, at around age 16, I knew what I wanted to do. Whenever anybody asks me this question, I always go back to, like, we had this thing from high school where you could write in it, like in your yearbook, of what you wanted to be, and I had everything so super planned out in my head. I knew that I was going to be a teacher. At that time, I thought I was going to be an English teacher. That part ended up changing mid college career, but I said, I'm going to teach school for 5 years and then I'm going to open up my own practice. And at that point, didn't say group practice. I knew I wanted to have my own private practice, like solo practice. Life didn't quite go that way where I only taught for 5 years. I ended up having 3 kids. Well, I have 4 kids actually, but in my 20s, I had 3 kids, and just life didn't line up for me to have a group practice. But I did open up my solo practice, and I did it on the side while I was teaching middle school. I ended up getting my degree in emotionally handicapped. That's kind of dating myself a bit, but that's when they would do special needs and they had them out like in the different categories. So I worked with the angry kids is how people categorized me at the middle school. So I had a self-contained classroom of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students, had a behavior specialist, 2 assistants, and really the school campus didn't want us around everybody else. They wanted us just to kind of stay on our own. So I taught all the subjects, had group. That was part of one of the things I had to do. So having my degree in mental health counseling, I honestly don't know how people taught what I taught without having that, because they went hand in hand working with that population. And I think the secure salary and having kids and having a husband who was sick at the time, that always prevented me from taking that leap of closing the door to teaching at the middle school and just doing my solo practice full time. Honestly, that was always a dream on the inside. And I think where I would kind of get renewed in my teaching part was I would have a child and be off on maternity leave and then get excited to come back and dive in. And so I looked at my students as kind of like my clients. I worked with their parents, I worked with them. Who wants to be taught English and math when you don't know if you're going to get beat up the night before, or if you, most of my students, I started going out to their homes to do their IEPs, their individual education plans. And that was a game changer for me because I got to see the living environment, what they were coming from. And this is back before schools had like the breakfast program and stuff. And at that point, I told my behavior specialist, we got to start feeding these kids breakfast. They're not even eating at home. And some of my students, like, that's their safe space. It was my classroom. They were the kids who didn't like Christmas break, summertime. Although there was part of them that was excited, a big part of them was like, how do we navigate that? So spring break, Christmas break, those were really hard times for my students because they saw kind of me as mom and my behavior specialist as dad. And we just really tried to foster that kind of environment, which I think is also how I lead in my group practice too. So that
Mm,
was my beginnings, and just knew that I wanted to be a counselor. And I think that came from my own experience being in counseling as a 16-year-old and really finding the value in it. And it just clicked with me like this is what I'm called to do.
mm. Now, when you started your group practice, when did you know it was time to level up into a group? Like, what you so you're did you start solo and then go into group, or do you just jump right into group?
I did. So I had the solo practice that I did part time, would do like 3 nights a week in the evenings. And then on Saturdays in the summertime, I would see more. And honestly, Joe, I know how to start and close a practice really well. I had a husband that was ill. He ended up passing away. And during that
Mm,
time, it was like, am I supposed to be doing this or not supposed to be doing this? Because I would get clients, I would be seeing them, life seemed to be going along fine. And then there was a medical emergency. And I would try to figure out like how, I mean, I had clients at one time coming to the hospital to meet with me because I was there for an extended period of time. Coming to the hospital let me use a conference room at the end of the hallway. And I literally saw clients that way. So there was a period of time in my life that I was like, I feel like this is what I was called to do. Why is this not working? My husband passes away. I have 4 kids. My youngest is disabled. Another kid is a type 1 diabetic. So we've got a lot of medical stuff that's going on. I get remarried. We're now a blended family. He's got 3, I've got 4. He's been an entrepreneur all his life. We enter into the year 2000. He's heard my story, right? Of course, I've talked to him about this. He sees me doing my private practice and working other jobs and things like that. And he sold his company. And it was in the summer of 2018 that he said, it's time to do it. Like your dream of having a group practice. I think I sell my business. We go into this together and that's what we do. I'm the CEO and he's the CFO. He is the CFO of our home and he's the CFO of our company. So he does a really good job of helping us to I give him the credit during COVID of how we were able to continue to grow and stay. Well, growing was a big part.
mm. Now, I know one thing is that teacher in you. You said before we started recording that has stayed as a through line in your practice. Tell me more
Yes.
about that.
So, and my clinicians tell me this all the time. I'm a teacher at heart. I think it shows up even as a clinician in my sessions with clients. But I have always enjoyed teaching and counseling. So, my group practice mission, part of our mission statement is to offer quality counseling to the community. So, we take every insurance, including Medicaid. That was a big sticking point for me, was to have clinicians who were willing to take Medicaid. And again, I think that came from the types of kids that I taught and seeing their life and what they were able to have access to. The area that I have my practice is actually in a very affluent part of Pinellas County, but it has the least amount of services. All of those Medicaid type services are offered South County. And so it was really important to me to do that. And then I thought, if I bring in students, I can offer free counseling to the community or highly discounted counseling. I can offer different tiers to give people that. And then it was in bringing in students. Now, keep in mind, I'm thinking of my graduate program, what I was taught, how it was done. That was all in person. I don't even know. Was the internet even out? No, not when I was in graduate school. I think it came out like right after as the information superhighway. So there was no online schooling. And it was in the first year of having students that I realized there was a huge gap. I would also say, Joe, became a qualified supervisor because in hiring, I had a lot of registered interns that were applying. And I realized that I had listened to your podcast and had
Mm,
learned a lot through when you were just beginning all of that and talking about being a qualified supervisor. So I wanted to do that. That was an extra income source. But I also saw that as an extra benefit I could offer to people as entice them to come and work for me. And from registered interns to students, I just identified this huge gap in learning, especially when I thought about online school. I really thought, and maybe there are, I don't want anybody getting angry, right? Maybe there are some schools that do this, but majority of the ones that I've come in contact with that have very large online programs in our field, it's almost like the students are really self-taught. They, once they get to that supervisory part, and they do like these 2 week residencies where they go to the school for 2 weeks. But I'm like, 2 weeks you're with people? After that, you're just reading your textbooks, writing papers, turning them in. And then once they start their practicum and internship, well, now they have what's called a supervisory class, but that's not until they start. So it's literally on the job training, which I know it was for us too. But still, when you were in the classroom, you were able to role play, your professors talking to you about things. There was a richness to it that I see lacking now. So that's when I think the teacher in me really just kind of came to life. And I was like, I'm really creating my perfect job, which is teaching and counseling and getting to invest in these lives and really helping to shape and mold what I think are excellent clinicians. And so it now my company has two missions, two brand promises, if you will, the one to the community, but to back that up and to be able to offer that, I have to then have my brand promise to clinicians that I'm going to teach you and offer you stuff from me. And where I lack that knowledge, I'm going to get it for you so that you have the trainings to be that your clinician toolbox is full so that you're not walking in that imposter syndrome longer than you have to. And so that I can make sure that we are following through on our brand promise, which is to offer quality counseling.
Mm. Now, when you think about kind of some of your first steps to really take on kind of a teaching approach, did you start with practicum students, interns, pre-license? Like, what were some of those early decisions you made?
My early decisions started with registered interns. So it started in being a qualified supervisor, hiring registered interns, and in my mind, in all honesty, at that point, I hadn't even thought about students. I thought I'm going to really, pour into supervision 1 hour a week, and I really thought that that's just all it would be. And in hiring these registered interns, most of them had their degrees from online schools. And so when I'm staffing cases and then I'm asking them for some video recordings just because I want to see like what their sessions are like, oh my gosh, then I realized this is a really great person and they have some skills, but where did you do your internship at again? And then I kind of went back and started asking questions. And I would say it was in that first 6 months of owning a group practice and hiring registered interns that then I realized, oh no, this is not just supervision once a week. I have to have a teaching model as a group practice owner. And I'm going to be, maybe we're doing supervision where I'm staffing specific cases, for that 1 hour a week, but I'm going to be offering trainings and I'm going to be teaching them things. And then from there is when I started having the idea that if I'm doing this with registered interns, I could be doing this with students and really just running that type of model in my practice.
Mm. So then, as you start to add registered interns, it sounds like you were kind of creating that infrastructure, that teaching beyond just the clinical supervision. Kind of how
Mhm.
did you expand and grow from there?
So I did have that idea of I will build it and they will come and they will love it. And I really felt that my model and how I was doing it was just going to, well, first, it did attract a lot of people. And I know our field has some turnover, but that's when I was like, okay, why am I experiencing a certain amount of turnover? This doesn't make me feel good about myself. What is wrong here? I had to do a mindset shift because I had been a solo practitioner for so long that in my head, I was like, well, if this is what you do when you're in private practice, like that's what I kept saying to people. This is what you do when you're in private practice. And honestly, it wasn't until a couple years into owning the group practice that it like hit me upside the head. Where I was like, wait a second, they're not in private practice to take a a term from another coworker of ours in the field. It's a semi-private practice. They're in a group practice, but they're not a solo practitioner. So why am I expecting them to do all the things that I had to do on my own when I was in solo practice? So I think that that's when I really began to focus on registered interns. I don't want them to have to focus on the things that I did as a solo practitioner. I want them to be able to focus on being the best clinician. So what are those tools? What are the things that I need to add? And then I began to market myself that way and do interviews that way. So a lot of marketing, because I have a lot of people that apply, but some of my marketing or a lot of it takes place in that interview where I'm deciding if I want to have them, but I'm also letting them know what they get in being in my practice and what stands out and is different with me. And then knowing the universities that my registered interns came from, then that's when I decided I just gave a shot in the dark, Googled some of those universities and reached out to them and got in contact with their counseling programs and then began to sign BAAs with the different universities to partner with them and have students in my area that are online with them. Did I answer
Mm.
your question?
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
I know a lot of people will start with kind of registered interns or pre-licensed. Did you dip your toes into practicum and also internships, or like was that something that you didn't really dive into?
Yeah, so after 6 months of having, let's see, I started my group practice and I hired. It was funny that when you were talking about the shows that you've done recently with the person hiring 10 people in 1 month. I know what that's like. I hired everybody and I didn't even have my group practice building yet. I only had my solo practice, my one office with a conference room at the end. And I did trainings and talked about blogging and used a lot of your stuff and things that you had on YouTube and stuff that I was in part of your membership group
Mm.
and taught them how to do different things. And I did that out of the conference room. And that was the month of August of 2018. And I started having them see clients and we just rotated. I hired 9 people in the month of August. They met with me in that conference room and I gave them a key to my office. And we literally started seeing clients and rotating out of one office. And September 1st, I rented and opened the group practice. And we were all in there painting. I did interviews in sweatpants and paint on my face. And we had clients coming in, and that's where it really began to take off. And I had 2 licensed people and a handful of registered interns. In that first month, I began to weed out some of those people that I had hired that just really weren't going to be able to make it or at the quality of really what I was looking for. And
I want to ask a
oh,
follow-up
sorry.
question right there. I think
Yeah.
so often people want to hire one person at a time, see how it goes. What is the value for you in hiring so many? One that I hear right away is you could weed out people that just aren't a good fit from the beginning. What other value? How else did that add value and maybe even accelerate things for you to hire so many people so quickly compared to just doing that one at a time model?
Yeah, I guess the one at a time works for some people. I liked having a handful of people to start with because I found such diversity in that. And then when people were calling, it allowed me, now if you're talking about like for owning a group practice, it allowed me to start to move out of that spotlight because people, of course, were calling to be with Sherry Linger, but we were able to put them with a different person. And if I only had one person to offer them, that would just doesn't allow you to grow at the rate that I think you can. I think when people think of hiring one person, they really shortchange themselves in how fast growth can happen in group practice when people are calling. And so if I can offer, if there's 5 of us that have 4 o'clock slots open, we're able to fill 5 4 o'clock slots instead of turning away people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think if I had just hired one person, well, we only got 2 4 o'clock slots. But we know that after 3 o'clock, those time slots are like prime, right? Everybody wants after school. And so that just allows me, that we got 5 clients booked at 4 o'clock versus just having two. So I think that's the benefit in that. And then it did allow me to start weeding and some people just naturally weeded themselves out. They were like, I don't think this is going to work for me. Maybe they were coming in part-time and they thought they could handle the 2 jobs. Like I told you, I did when I was a teacher and then did private practice on the side. I had some people like that, and I think they bit off more than they could chew. And plus, I was a new group practice. So there was a lot that was changing. That was one of my core values, flexibility, because there's a lot that changes in those first few years as you're growing and scaling. You've got to change everything.
Mm, yeah. Thanks for letting me interrupt you to kind of like dig into that.
Oh,
So you're getting these 9 or 10 people. Some are pre-licensed, some are fully licensed. So take me into specifically the teaching practice and developing that from that point.
yeah. So then about 6 months, as I'm working with the registered interns, and I have this huge group room, which in the beginning, I had these visions for having the wellness center. We were going to be breaking free services center for wellness. And my husband said, why don't you, I get your big vision. I support that. But why don't you hone in right now on what you're really good at instead of spreading yourself thin in starting a group practice? You're really great at mental health counseling and you're really great at teaching. Hone in on that. Let's have you perfect that before we start hiring the registered dietitian, bringing in the yoga person, like all those different parts of wellness. And at first I was like, oh no, he's sucking the joy out of my dream. But that's where his personality and mine is different. And he'll tell you, I'm not a joy killer. I'm a realist and I'm the dreamer, right? So I'm the visionary. I fly high and he keeps me grounded. And after I got out of my feelings on that one, I was like, no, you're totally right. There is so much that I need to perfect on this part of just having counselors. And that's when I, hit the books, like with research, looking up, listening to people, all that I could on what I felt that counselors really needed to know, like counseling 101, and began building that into my model during the week. And then that's when I thought, let me contact the universities. So about 6 months into having the group practice, I began to contact the universities. So at year one, I had registered interns and licensed. And at year one, I began to bring in practicum students and people in level one internship. My agreement with universities is that people have to stay for all three practicum and their 2 internships, or I can have them for 2 internships, but I won't take anybody for one, because being a private practice, I can't and won't do that to somebody, have them be with somebody for 12 weeks and then say they're gone. I want them at least for 24, if not more. So pretty much everybody who comes in as a student into my practice, they're with me for a year. They're there for practicum and their 2 internships, and they work through the holidays. They do all of that.
I think that's from an ethical standpoint. I know that when when I did my internship, the people that were just knew like, okay, like I'm gonna have you for 1 semester, and then I move on to another person. So I like that you really kind of said, here's how I'm gonna do it. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com, and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. Now, what advice would you give people that are thinking about starting a teaching group practice? Like, what any tips that you would give them?
Yes, I would say for the teaching model, be prepared for really feeling like you are the university and wondering, what is the university teaching these people? um, and so you have to be highly committed to that. And then I would say, I would never be able to do what I'm doing if I didn't also identify other people in my practice. And Well, let me back up, Joe, and say when I talk about having students, I have large cohorts of students in my practice. So, and by large cohorts, I mean I have I have 10 incoming students coming in January on top of the students I already have who will be in their level 2 internship. So we run different cohorts. And so you're looking at me having, 15 between 15 to 20 students or 15 to 18 students in my practice on top of my employees because I have W-2 employees and I have 1099s.
Mm.
So when I was smaller, so we'll start with the small group practice, somebody who wants to bring in maybe 2 students, that is incredibly doable for one person. And if you're a teacher at heart, I'm telling you, there's nothing better than helping to shape and mold somebody. And then the benefit of that, besides what you're able to offer to the community, because it's not all just free services. There are some pro bono, but most people are paying something coming in to see my students. The benefit of that is in my practice, they've turned into employees. So they finished their internship. Ones that I found that were outstanding, just hungry and humble and smart. And I saw that in their practicum and internship. They got job offers for me at the end. So then that's rotating it. It wasn't just all for nothing, right? Then there
Yeah.
are some that I was like, you were a struggle to lead as a student. I do not want to pay to do that as well. So we will part ways and good luck to you. And so they go on and that's great. So I think when you're a small group practice doing that, it's just you. When you become a larger group practice like myself, and you're teaching to registered interns and you're doing it to students who are far more needy and needing so much more from you, is to really offer quality counseling and not just fake it till they make it while they're going through, and to really churn out quality counselors. Then you have to have other people on your staff who have bought into that as well and want to help partner with you in overseeing practicum students and helping you along with that, so that that whole burden isn't just falling on you, because it can just feel overwhelming.
Hmm. Now, one question I've been asking a lot of the seven-figure practice owners is kind of the idea that there's times when we plateau and there's times when we have like massive growth, and usually understanding the struggle of that phase. When you're going from a solo practice to a group practice, one of the big struggles is learning to take off hats. You've taken on so many hats to get to that
Oh,
6 figures, and you just got to learn to outsource, and that you're not the main go-to person anymore. And like that's a big struggle of people going from say 0 to 10 clinicians in their practice. Now, for you as a seven-figure practice owner, as you're growing, as you're expanding, what are the struggles that you see at this phase?
at this phase, okay, so in all honesty, I think I've done a really great job at delegating and creating a structure in my practice so that I don't wear all the hats. I think for me, it is this is going to sound, I don't want this to sound bad because I am very busy and I have a lot to do with the students, but I think I was so involved in everything before, Joe, and I wore so many hats where it did like impact my marriage, it impacted my family, like my own health, right? And delegating and creating a structure has been a wonderful thing. And sometimes I start to feel like I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing right now or today. Like
Mm.
I'm not scheduled to be in the office. I don't have to be in the office. And so what does my day need to look like? I mean, I went from like in my 20s, right? Like 20s and 30s being a teacher, my day is very structured. Being a group practice owner in the beginning, there was so much like building. I mean, it was all consuming. If people don't think that it is, it 100% is all consuming in the beginning, and then you hit those plateaus and you feel like you breathe a little bit, and then it's that span of growth again, and it's like, hey, we're back up and running. And now I it's like I feel great that I don't have to be doing all of that, but I'm not retired. I still am very involved, but not at the same level I was before. Does that make sense? Like I feel
Hmm.
like I think at nighttime, like when I'm sitting there thinking about my next day, or my husband says, like, what do you have planned for tomorrow? And I'm like, what do I have planned for tomorrow? Like there's certain days that I have specific things planned in the practice, but then there's others days that it's not.
Hmm.
And I think that that's kind of a personal struggle for me right now. Like what are those days supposed to look like? And I've been so used, I'm 47. I've been so used to being so busy that then to not have that busyness almost feels wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just in a mastermind group today that I was running, and we were talking about something very similar to this, where the way we look at income changes so much over time. And, there's some
Mm,
individuals in this group that are closer to retirement age, and there's other people that are more around my age and mid 40s. And just looking at, especially as you grow your business, it's not like I show up for something and then I get paid X number of dollars. It's
right.
that, with Practice the Practice, we've got passive income coming through affiliate links and through sponsorships, and then we have memberships, and none of it's tied to 1 hour of mine equals this amount. But
Yes.
it's just
Yes.
like saying, well, like, which plates that are spinning are bringing in the most revenue, which ones are bringing in the most joy. And it actually makes us, I think, when we're at a certain level, start to think through, like, okay, if money, it's not that money's not an object. Like, we all have budgets, we all have our lifestyle
For
that we're
sure.
living, but when it's not a struggle and you have to just make ends meet, then it's sort of like, well, why am I doing the work I'm doing? Like, what do I find interesting? Where am I curious? Where do I want to personally develop? And how much do I
Yes.
want to work or give or volunteer or impact, whatever any of those things are? And up till this point, for you or for me, oftentimes the path is pretty linear. It's like, you start the practice, you add a couple clinicians, or in your case, a bazillion clinicians. You add a bazillion clinicians, and then it's like, okay, like, you keep doing the marketing, you get the client acquisition going down, your systems are going, and then it's like, okay, like, that was straightforward, and it took time and it took effort and money and all those things. But now it's not linear anymore. It's really, what do we get? It actually, as I'm talking, kind of reminds me of, for me, what relationships used to be versus, are for me now, where, I followed the very typical relationship ladder, dated, engaged, married, kids, and then,
Mm-hmm.
had an unexpected divorce a couple years ago, and I have almost sole custody of my kids. And so it's like, I now get to say with my partner Claire, like, what do we want our relationship to look like? She still has her own house and enjoys having her own she shed to go back to, her little
Right.
cabin on the water. And it's like, we don't have to say, well, we have to live together to have a good relationship, or we have to. It's like, we get to say, well, it's not linear anymore. We get to decide in our relationship, and it feels like that's pretty similar to how, when you get to a certain point, your business becomes just a lot of options, and like, where do I want to spend my
Yeah.
time?
And I mean, they did in your mastermind group, which is great. I don't think like in a lot of the groups, like membership groups, like I don't think anybody really, or at least I don't remember them talk. I remember people talking about like when to phase yourself out as a clinician and not see clients anymore. I don't remember anybody talking about like what do you do when like you're making the most money you've ever made. So yay. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I mean, I joke with my clinicians, like when I talk to them about this is a business. Like I wear the clinical hat, right? So I understand like here's what I have to look at for clients. I said, but then keep in mind I'm also the business owner. So the business side of me says we have to be seeing this many clients. This is what our revenue has to be at to keep the doors open or to pay for trainings or to give raises. And so I wear those two odd hats with my employees. And so I joke and say like it's no secret that I make money off of each one of you here in the practice seeing clients. But it's, I mean, because it almost feels like taboo, like you can't talk about it. Like, hello, that is how I make my living.
Yeah.
But there's also other things that I do too, things beyond that, like being a qualified supervisor and stuff like that, and or doing consultations or doing speaking engagements. But you get to this point like where you're making the most money you ever have, and then like your calendar isn't. I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh my god, there's nothing on there. What, there should be stuff on my calendar, and it almost feels a little panicky. Like I use therapy notes, right? And so I've always joked and said like, if you want to know what Sherry's doing in her life, just look at her schedule, because I literally would have on there like put Deacon on the bus, go to this doctor's appointment. Like
Mhm.
my entire life was on there because I was so busy in the practice that I had to schedule my personal stuff along with my business stuff, so you knew where I was at all times. And now I look on there and it's that white part, like when you're scheduled to work and it's just empty, and I'm like, there feels like there should be something on there, but there's not. And that's a weird space to be in. But
Yeah.
I agree with you, like that's some of the self-reflecting that I've been doing in the last couple of months with that. And that's for me with that teaching model. I'm like, all right, I'm taking on some more students. That's going to be my passion right now, is really pouring into my students. My practice is running well. I have great clinical managers. I always feel like my admin could be doing stuff a little bit better. So that can be my focus. That continues to be my focus sometimes, right? But the rest of the practice, like, it's running and it's running well. And I do supervision with them so they see me, and I do some open office hours where I'm sitting there, like right now I'm binge watching the morning show, which I absolutely love. And so, like, next to me is my laptop, and then I'll tell my husband, like, hold on, I got to pause for a second. Somebody just came into the Zoom link. So I'll do open office hours so that if somebody has a question, like a staffing or an admin type question, I can answer it. That's a way that they feel supported and I'm still involved, right? But it's allowed me to really tap into some of the stuff by Dr. Dan Siegel that I've always been fascinated by and wanting to learn more of. So I've been able to do that, and then regurgitating it and teaching it to the people in my practice, and then really deciding that 2024, man, I'm just all in on students. And I think if I didn't have that structure and give myself that free time, I wouldn't be able to do that. But it's been a doozy these past couple of months of almost feeling like I wasn't being productive enough because I was so busy before. So, and I think if you're an entrepreneur, I think those, like, we struggle with that, right? Because we're always building something or creating something. And so then when you have that downtime, it's like, this feels like I'm possibly doing something wrong.
Yeah. Well, Sherry, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would say that there's so many different things. So I'm going to land on this one, Joe, that it's great to have plans for yourself. Like I told you that I knew I wanted to teach for 5 years and then go into solo practice. And though I did that and I said I wanted to have a group practice, it's okay if things have to slow down, if things don't go at the timeline that you originally planned for yourself, as long as you keep assessing where you're at and keep your goal in mind. Sometimes our dreams don't come right when we're scheduling it and wanting it to happen. Life throws us curveballs, death, divorce, whatever. And even if it happens later than you wanted it to, mine didn't happen until I was 42. That was so much later than I planned when I was 16 and writing it in my book. It was supposed to be 5 years after I graduated college. And so the fact that it happened at age 42, but it's been the most amazing ride these last 5 years owning the group practice. So I'm so glad that I never gave up and that I kept continuing to try, and that I shared my dream and my vision with my husband, who I've been married to now for 10 years, but I shared that with him in the beginning so that he knew, like, that was my heart's desire. And then he was all in to do it with me, after being married for 5 years. But I'd say that's the biggest thing, is don't give up. You have that dream and you're looking around you and you see everybody else is doing it, and you're feeling like it's not going to happen for you or what's wrong with you. Maybe it's just not your time.
That's so awesome. If people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, where's the best place for us to send them?
So people can reach me at my website, which is breakingfreeservices.com. And then my email is Sherry, but my name is spelled different, SHARI, at breakingfreeservices.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Yes, it's been great. You're like the very first counselor that I listened to online. So this is like coming full circle for me. So
That's
excited.
so awesome. Oh my gosh. I never get sick of hearing that. Thank you so much for being on the show.
The first one I listened to you was when you talked about taking couples out and doing like AMC gift card or some kind of gift cards.
Oh yeah, dinner and a counseling session.
Yes, that one. That was my very first one I heard from you. Anyway,
oh man, those were the days. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that this series is normalizing what it means to be a 7-figure practice owner, while also showing you there's a lot of work that goes into it. And that doesn't mean that needs to be scary. That doesn't mean that you need to just say, oh my gosh, I can't do that. But that it's starting with a vision, it's taking some risks, it's taking some jumps, and looking at what's working in your market, expanding on it, sometimes doubling down and putting money back into the business instead of pulling it out. So many awesome lessons we're learning through this series. And if you are a seven-figure practice owner, I imagine this series has been really helpful for you, hearing your peers give you advice and thoughts and different ways of thinking through things. I know for myself, I really wish I still had my practice in some ways where, I'm learning all these things. I'm like, maybe I should start a counseling practice again and just, show that process. Because, it's really exciting to think about building that kind of culture and that different way of doing things. If you are a seven-figure practice owner, our seven-figure practice club just opened up on December 1st. That opens up, those applications are open until January 31st. So we wanted to give people time to read the website, think through it, look at their finances, decide if that's going to fit to join that. We are only accepting 12 people into that. So please make sure you apply over at practiceofthepractice.com/club. You do have to have a seven-figure practice. We aren't looking at your financials, but we are trusting you to say, yes, I am a seven-figure practice. And so you can apply over at /club. And we're going to be meeting twice a month, once with hot seats, once with peer-led teachings, and then we'll be doing some meetups throughout the year in person in cool places like Traverse City, Michigan. Woo-woo. Also, we couldn't do this show without our amazing sponsors. Therapy Notes has been a sponsor for years. They are the best electronic health records out there. They make it so easy. Also, they now have forms that you can customize. That was something that for a while we had been giving feedback on, and their IT team worked with us to make that user-friendly. We really work hard here at Practice of the Practice with our sponsors to make sure that as we get feedback from you, that gets back to the top management. And so when we don't see that, we don't keep those sponsors because we want to make sure that we are recommending the best products out there. And Therapy Notes is that. Use promo code Joe at checkout to get a couple months for free. If you are in one of our membership communities, or if you are in any consulting or any of our programs and you're new to Therapy Notes, we can get you usually 4 extra months free to get you 6 months free. So make sure you reach out to us. If you're joining Therapy Notes for the first time, use promo code Joe so they know that their podcast sponsorship money is working. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.